Maybe this would be a good question for Chris Wakelin. We could throw it to him, having had to sit there and watch Ronnie O'Sullivan make 2 out there in Saudi. Goodness me. Hey guys, the Q&A video I did last time went down really well, so it's been a while. Thought we'd do another one. Got a few questions here I'm going to go through. They're in no particular order. So here we go. Jump straight in. Paul McKeaney on Facebook. Paul, I've totally butchered your name. I'm really sorry. Paul says, what's the secret to winning the World Championship? What is required? Well, Paul, I wish I knew. I've been trying to find that and discover that for the last 20 years. I can't remember. In all seriousness, I think, there's obviously a lot of qualities you need to win the World Championship. A bit of an endurance test and, you've got to score well and obviously go through, some of, if not the greatest and best players that have ever played the sport. Yeah, I've tried for 20 years to recreate the magic of 2005. So far, I've failed miserably. Despite, I've been to the final 4 times, obviously won it 20 years ago, and I've lost in the final a further 3 times. So I've been close, but no cigar. If you know what the secrets are, please pass them on, because I've forgotten. Right, David White on Facebook. He says, hi Sean, what's the most technically difficult shot you have to play, and what's your favourite shot? Oh, geez, that's a really good question. I actually think the hardest shot to play is probably the first one that everyone plays, and that's the break-off. I think technically there's so much going on with the break-off, with the side spin that you need, the distance between cue ball and object ball, not trying to leave a red on either side pocket, trying to get the cue ball back to the ball cushion. You don't know how the side's going to react with that particular table on that particular day, and depending on what level you're playing at, the break-off could be your last shot. Break-off is so overlooked and so underestimated. I've got the break-off as one of, if not the most difficult shot. My favourite shot, I love a good long pot, got to be honest. I love one of those good crunching long reds, stunning behind the black, round the angles for the blue, or a blue split, high on the blue, smash into the cluster and get the pack open and hopefully win the frame in one hit. I'll go for a long red. Everyone loves a long red. Stevie Graham, again on Facebook, it says, at what point during a 1-4-7 break for your opponent do you start willing them on to complete the break? Maybe this would be a good question for Chris Wakelin. We could throw it to him, having had to sit there and watch Ronnie O'Sullivan make 2 out there in Saudi. Watching 1's hard enough. Having to watch somebody make 2 against you, that'll be enough to make you retire. I suppose the answer is once the frame's in the bag. Once your opponent gets over the frame line in terms of they've won the frame, well then you're willing them on. Unless you're the guy who's made the 1-4-7 in the tournament already and you might have to split the prize money, then you might not be willing them on so much. But I think, if you're not interested, if it doesn't affect you in any way, then I don't know any players that wouldn't be urging on their opponent, once that frame's in the bag, to then push on and try to make the 1-4-7. There's nothing more special. Jason Wilson, again on Facebook, says, why is ale so expensive in Dublin? It's a very good question. It's absolutely true as well. I've heard stories of bars in Dublin that increase their price on the hour, every hour, for a pint of Guinness, depending on how busy they are. So you never know, do you? But yeah, I've got no idea, to be honest. You would never know it's expensive because all the bars are full every single day. I've got no idea. But a nice pint of Guinness is very, very hard to beat. Moving on, Martin McBride, again on Facebook. What's your biggest ever comeback? Do you know what? I've made a few good comebacks over the years. A couple that spring to mind. The Wushy Classic final against Ding Junhui. This match gets forgotten about a little bit. Ding might not forget it, but a lot of people forget about this one. I was 8-2 behind in the final, best of 17, so only first to 9. And it was in Ding's hometown of Wushy. There was an entire set of dignitaries waiting to present him, I think, with a car and the keys to an apartment. And I remember all the dignitaries, they came out to take their seats when we started the 11th frame, because everyone thought that was going to be it over and done with. And I just dug in. I got to the interval 8-4, and from then on, it was like Rocky IV. where he turns the crowd and they all start shouting for him. All the crowd started shouting for me. It was a very strange atmosphere. And in the end, I managed to win the match 9-8. That's got to be one of my best comebacks of all time. Andrew Milbourne says, which 3 players of the 70s or 80s would you have loved to play? I really would have loved to have played John Spencer, Ray Reardon, Terry Griffiths, Alex Higgins. You know, they talk about the atmosphere when Ronnie O'Sullivan plays and Jimmy White plays. You know, you're usually second favourite when you play one of those people. But I think when people played Alex, I think it was a step up. I think he was the people's champion. And I think it would have been incredible to have gone up against that. You tested yourself in that environment. A lot of players I know who did it said it wasn't very pleasant. I know Steve Davis and Alex Higgins had a tough relationship, and it was always very hard when Steve went up against Alex. But would have been interesting to have done that. We met John Spencer on one occasion. He was the first man to come to my dressing room after I won the World Championship in 2005. He was the very first person to knock on the door and wish me congratulations. He knocked on, I opened the door. I expected to see my coach, and there, smiling at me, was John Spencer, and he welcomed me to the World Champions Club. And that was a lovely gesture. I'll never forget meeting John. Why isn't a spotted cue ball used in tournaments to better promote spectator or audience engagement? Easy for me to say. Yeah, great question. Something I've been banging on about for a long time, to be honest. I've been trying to get a spotted cue ball in use at certain tournaments for as long as I can remember. I'm not sure why. We are currently, I think, the only cue sport in the world that doesn't use a spotted cue ball. I know some people and some sports don't like change. I think the spotted cue ball would be a real positive addition to the game of snooker. I use it a lot in practice. I use it in most of my YouTube videos so that you guys can see the spin that I'm applying to that cue ball. I think a lot of the skill of snooker is lost on the general public because they can't see how we're manipulating that cue ball around the table. They can't see how we're spinning it unless the cue ball arcs and it looks super fancy. I think the game would be appreciated a lot more. I think the general public would have a much deeper understanding of what we're actually doing to the ball if we had a spotted cue ball. I think it would make the game better. But the powers that be haven't listened to me yet. They don't tend to listen to me on much, and I doubt they will listen to me going forward. So we're stuck with the good old-fashioned plain cue ball. Frankie Brandt on Facebook. Which player did you most like to see play when you were growing up? Do you know what? I started playing snooker. It was at the end of Steve Davis's reign in the early 90s. He was my idol. He was the guy I loved to watch. I went to watch Peter Ebdon make his debut at the Crucible against Steve. I remember going to the assembly rooms in Derby to watch Steve. Growing up in Northamptonshire, the Derngate Theatre in Northampton, I remember going to watch, I'm sure it was either an early Matchroom League match or potentially a world doubles match that involved Steve. You know, just watching how he gripped the cue, how he bridged, his shot selection, his technique. Yeah, he was the guy I really, you know, wanted to watch. And then Stephen Hendry took over and he became the guy I wanted to watch. I don't give Stephen many compliments. Stephen, if you're watching, and why would you be? But if you are watching, that's a compliment. Jack Cotterill says, would it be possible to get a collab or a collaboration, or however you want to say it, would it be possible to get a collaboration with another snooker player, maybe Stephen Hendry, where you're both playing a frame against each other and both talk through your shots? Yeah, I think that is possible. There's a slight complication to getting two players on a channel like mine, two players that are both currently playing. There's a slight complication there, I think, in terms of the player's contract showing live snooker. You know, if we were doing a TikTok live or whatever it might be. But I think on the YouTube channel, I think that's something we could do because it's not live. And so that we might be able to get around that. Stephen gets around it, obviously, because Stephen's not on the tour now, and so that's okay. But yeah, I think that's something that will come down the track. Always very, you know, aware and don't want to sort of necessarily copy everyone else's content. You know, you want to try and keep your channel original, trying to have our own ideas. But, you know, I suppose on a snooker table, snooker room is the snooker room, the table is the table. And, you know, there is only a finite amount of ideas we can come up with. So I'm sure at some stage we'll get different creators on, we'll get different players on, and those kind of, you know, talking it through, those almost in the frame videos, but with another player, will definitely come. Get into their mindset. Why do they think what they think? How do they work it out? And yeah, I think that's something we'll look at in the future. But we don't want to, you know, we'd never want to be accused of of copying. I think there's some really good creators out there. There's some great channels out there. I love Stephen's channel, love the Q-Tips channel. I've been on it a couple of times myself, really enjoy it. I love watching the content as well. So, you know, happy. I think there's room for everybody. And we're all just trying to find our way, aren't we? Okay. How about when players lie halfway on the table to reach a shot? Any special technique for that? No, not really. As long as you keep one foot on the floor, you can do what you want. And don't touch any of the balls with your suit or your cuff of your shirt or whatever. You can do anything you want to do. But if you hear that table creaking, it could be time to put the Mars bars down. Question. For a long pot, do you prefer the object ball to be closer to the cue ball, closer to the pocket, or roughly in the middle? Good question, this, because what is a long pot? Is a long pot based on how far the cue ball has to travel, or is it based on how far the object ball has to travel? I noticed this when I've been doing my work for TV companies and they talk about long pot success. There'll be shots that I don't think are long pots. Long pots for me is about how far the cue ball has to travel from the tip to the object ball. I want that distance to be at least maybe 7 or 8 feet. Can you hear those seagulls? Otherwise, for me, it's not a long pot. So, you know, distance, however long that object ball has to travel, for me, doesn't make it a long shot. I think it's all about how far the cue ball has to go. So I think it's about that distance that's important. If the cue ball only has to travel a foot to hit the object ball, it's not a long shot, is it? Don't know how people get that wrong. Going to wrap it up there, guys. Hope you've enjoyed it. Going to do these Q&As from time to time. If you've got any questions, pop them in the comments. And see you next time.